Imagine this. A doctor, practicing for 10 years, spotless record, suddenly gets told, nope, you can't treat these patients anymore. And what if that decision wasn't just about, medical practice, but tangled up in a huge fight involving big insurance and even federal racketeering lawsuits? Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are really getting into it, the case of Dr. Vadim Lerman. He's an orthopedic spine surgeon, and the New York State Workers' Compensation Board, let's call them the WCB, denied his application renewal. We're going to unpack the WCB's reasons, Dr. Lerman's pushback, and these surprising claims about powerful players, system stakeholders maybe pulling strings from behind the scenes.
Yeah, and understand this. We've got the key documents. We're looking at the official WCB denial letter, Dr. Lerman's legal challenge to that, a review by another spine surgery expert, and even input from an anti-fraud group that's watching related federal cases. So quite a mix.
Right. Our mission here is to boil all this down, pull out the crucial bits so you can really grasp what's going on. The clash between medical rules, the regulators, and the money side of workers' comp. Expect some twists. Okay, so the WCB made this call back on April 15th, 2025. It sounds like they didn't take it lightly. What were the core issues they raised about Dr. Lerman?
Well, their summary points to what they termed a consistent series of non-compliant behaviors. Basically, things they felt just didn't meet the standard.
Oh.
Broadly, they said his actions put patients or claimants at risk from invasive surgery, that his records weren't complete or credible enough.
Okay, documentation issues.
Exactly. And insufficient medical reasons given for procedures, submitting requests, PARs, prior authorization requests that fell outside their specific medical treatment guidelines, or MDGs, without enough backup, and also some billing irregularities.
So patient risk, justification, paperwork, guidelines, a whole cluster of things.
Pretty much, yeah. Those were the main pillars of their denial.
Can you walk us through an actual case? Like, how did they say these problems showed up with a real patient?
Sure. Let's take claimant G3325814. The WCB flagged that Dr. Lerman recommended a pretty major surgery, an ACDF, anterior cervical discectomy and fusion, at the C5-6 neck level on the very first visit he documented.
First visit.
That's what the WCB noted, yeah. February 6, 2023. And their concern was, well, this patient was still getting conservative treatment like physical therapy. They'd also had 3 steroid injections, ESIs, which gave some relief, even if it was temporary. The WCB stated his notes didn't clearly pin down the cause of the pain. The diagnostic tests, the EDX studies, apparently suggested 3 possibilities, and the MRI didn't seal the deal on nerve pressure or instability. So their issue was recommending big surgery right out of the gate without fully exploring why the patient hurt or letting conservative care run its full course. Then later, he apparently sent in another PAR for that same surgery, ACDF, but this time for 2 levels, C5-6 and C6-7, using the same diagnostic reports.
Yeah.
That got denied too. And here's a key point for the WCB. Eventually, another surgeon did perform the ACDF, but on August 9, 2023, and apparently without getting that PAR approval first. The WCB said this denied the patient the system's built-in protections.
Inherent safeguards afforded by the PAR review process. That sounds serious. It really hinges on these medical treatment guidelines, the MTGs, doesn't it? What exactly are they?
They are basically the rule book published by the New York WCB. Evidence-based standards for treating work injuries. They lay out what tests are appropriate, what treatments, and crucially, often the order things should happen in. Like, you need to document trying X, Y, and Z conservative treatments for a specific period before surgery Z is even considered.
So a roadmap for care.
Exactly.
Right.
Meant to ensure care is necessary, effective, fits the injury, and is efficient. For neck injuries, like in this case, they typically demand clear imaging proof of nerve issues or instability, and that surgery matches up with all the clinical signs and test results. It's about logical steps.
Okay, so that lays out the WCB's perspective pretty clearly. But Dr. Lerman isn't just rolling over. He filed a legal challenge calling their decision arbitrary, capricious, and unlawful. What's his counterargument?
Well, Dr. Lerman strongly pushes back. He emphasizes his decade-plus history treating workers' comp patients with, as he puts it, without any complaints, disciplinary actions, or prior denials. He argues the whole thing started with a baseless complaint from a self-interested insurance company, that the WCB's evidence is incredible, and that the process itself had legal and procedural flaws. A key point for him is that he believes the review wasn't done by someone impartial with the right spine specialty knowledge.
And he didn't just say this himself. He brought in backup, right? Another expert.
He did, yeah. Dr. Alexander Vaccaro. He's a board-certified orthopedic spine surgeon, very well regarded, lots of clinical and academic background. Dr. Vaccaro did his own independent review of those same 5 patient cases the WCB cited.
Looking at everything, records, scans, reports.
Seems like it. Clinical notes, imaging, operative reports, if any, the WCB's guidelines, their denial reasoning, even PT and pain management records. A deep dive from a clinical perspective.
And what did Dr. Vaccaro conclude? Did he agree with the WCB?
Quite the opposite, actually. His conclusions strongly supported Dr. Lerman. He stated Lerman's surgical recommendations were medically indicated, evidence-based, and consistent with the New York MTGs. He found, quote, no evidence that Dr. Lerman performed, recommended, or sought authorization for any procedure that was unnecessary or excessive.
Wow, completely different take.
Completely. Vaccaro said Lerman's approach showed a logical clinical progression from conservative care to surgical intervention, backed up by scans, tests, and the patient's functional problems. He also made a point of saying that other independent surgeons later confirmed Lerman's assessments and did the recommended surgeries, apparently with good results. And he directly stated the WCB's reasoning had factual and clinical inaccuracies.
So how can you have two expert views, the WCB's presumably expert-informed review, and Dr. Vaccaro's be so totally opposite on the same cases? What does that signal?
It really highlights a fundamental tension, doesn't it? The WCB is looking through a regulatory lens, strict adherence to documented guideline steps. Checkbox A, checkbox B.
Right, compliance-focused.
Exactly. Whereas Dr. Vaccaro seems to be emphasizing clinical judgment, the nuances of an individual patient's history, how things evolve. Medicine isn't always perfectly linear. It suggests a potential clash between rigid regulatory interpretation and more dynamic clinical practice realities.
Let's revisit that specific patient, G3325814, the one the WCB said had surgery recommended too early. How did Dr. Lerman and Dr. Vaccaro explain that one?
Right, so for G3325814, Lerman counters the premature surgery claim head-on. He details that the patient actually had 6 months of conservative care first.
6 months, not just a quick look.
According to his petition, yes, including physical therapy 3 or 4 times a week, plus those 3 steroid injections that only gave fleeting relief. Then he recommended the ACDF. He also argues the diagnostics did point strongly to the C5-C6 level. The MRI showed disc herniation there. The EDX confirmed nerve involvement at C6. He mentioned the MRI showed effacement of the subarachnoid space, basically, evidence of nerve pressure.
Okay, so he says the evidence was there.
Yes. And regarding submitting multiple PARs, he frames that as treatment is a dynamic process. His request changed as he tried to manage the patient's ongoing symptoms. He claims that WCB denials were just procedural, not based on medical need. And circling back to that other surgeon doing the C5-C6 ACDF later, Lerman points to that as proof his original judgment was correct all along.
It really sounds like his core argument is the WCB missed the clinical forest for the bureaucratic trees. They focused on paperwork technicalities over the patient's actual condition and treatment journey.
That seems to be the thrust of it, yes. But then the story takes another turn, moving beyond just the clinical details.
Right. This is where it gets even more complicated. Dr. Lerman's petition claims this whole WCB action is linked to these huge federal lawsuits, RME cases. What's the alleged connection?
This is definitely where it gets murky and high stakes. The WCB's own denial letter mentions the cases came to their attention through a system stakeholder connected to specific lawsuits. Roosevelt Road Re, LTD, LV Surgicare of Westside LLC, and related cases, which they call the IRABO matters. Dr. Lerman's petition names that stakeholder, tradesman program managers, an insurance entity that is a party in those IRAGO lawsuits.
And Lerman is saying this wasn't just a neutral tip-off. He's alleging tradesmen influenced the WCB.
That's exactly his claim. He alleges the WCB's decision is tangled up in a broader campaign driven by tradesmen. He even points to an email supposedly sent to the WCB in March 2024.
An email saying what?
According to Lerman's filing, this email from an investigator at NYC Transit referencing the lawsuit and tradesman's lawyer talked about a goal of wiping these guys out for a big win for the industry. Lerman argues the WCB shouldn't be, in his words, complicit in that agenda.
Wow. Okay, that's a serious allegation suggesting the regulatory board is being used as a tool in a corporate legal fight. Are others worried about this kind of influence?
It seems so. There's mention of several New York State Assembly members sending a letter to the Attorney General Letitia James back in February 2025. They apparently asked for an investigation into Roosevelt Road Re and Ionian Re tradesmen's affiliates, calling them shadow insurance carriers.
Shadow carrier.
Yeah, and alleging things like fraudulent conduct, denying valid claims, pressuring injured workers into low settlements, and filing frivolous lawsuits to block treatment and compensation. So there's definitely wider political and legal scrutiny of these entities' practices.
So one side paints a picture of the WCB being improperly influenced, maybe even weaponized, but there's another perspective on this, right? From the iFraud Foundation.
Yes, the iFraud Foundation, which describes itself as an independent anti-fraud organization, pushes back strongly against the idea of improper influence on the WCB. Their stance is the WCB is the proper authority here. They have a duty to investigate complaints about providers, no matter who brings the complaint forward. They believe the WCB's investigation stands on its own, based on the records in their files.
Okay, so they see it as a legitimate oversight, regardless of the source of the initial complaint.
Right. And crucially, they have a completely different take on those surgeries that happened later, without WCB approval.
The ones Lerman says vindicate him.
Exactly. iFraud argues that those unapproved surgeries actually support the allegations in the federal IACO lawsuit. They connect it to something called litigation funding.
Litigation funding.
Yeah, the idea that outside investors might be paying for expensive procedures, approved or not, as part of a larger alleged scheme, potentially hoping for a payout from lawsuits later. They also mention that, generally, in these kinds of complex fraud cases, you sometimes see things like affiliated diagnostic centers or even altered images used to justify unnecessary surgeries. So from their view, the WCB's findings might align with broader patterns of concern.
Man, this is complex. You've got the doctor saying clinical judgment was ignored due to insurance company pressure. You've got the WCB citing specific guideline failures. And you've got an anti-fraud group saying those failures might fit into a larger alleged fraudulent scheme highlighted in federal court.
It truly sits at a complicated crossroads. Medical standards, regulatory enforcement, insurance battles, and serious legal accusations. It shows how messy workers' comp can get when big money and litigation are involved.
Absolutely. It feels like a microcosm of system-wide pressures. But threading through all these arguments from the WCB, from Lerman, from iFraud is one constant theme: documentation.
Could agree more. It's absolutely central. The WCB hammered on Lerman's alleged consistent failure to provide or maintain adequate medical documentation, missing details, inconsistencies. That was core to their denial.
In iFraud, even while disagreeing on the influence part, they also stressed good record keeping.
Very much so. They pointed to standard guidelines from the AMA, from Medicare CMS, emphasizing that records have to be complete, legible, and timely. They need to clearly show who did what, and crucially, why it was medically necessary. All those standard parts of a note, chief complaint, history, exam, assessment, plan, they're not just formalities. They're essential for compliance, for justifying care, and, as they put it, to withstand audit scrutiny. They even warned against just copy and pasting old notes, cloning, because auditors look for that.
So what's the big takeaway here for you, the listener, trying to make sense of these complex healthcare and legal fights?
I think this case really drives home that good documentation isn't just busy work. It's foundational. It's how doctors defend their clinical decisions, it's a safeguard for patients, and it's the primary evidence when billing or necessity is questioned. When things get contentious, when you have these powerful competing narratives like we see here, the medical record is often the closest thing you have to objective ground truth.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground today. A doctor fighting for his license, the detailed world of medical guidelines, and these powerful, often unseen legal and financial forces at play.
It really lays bare the pressure points, doesn't it? Where patient care, following the rules, and these intense economic battles all collide. And individuals, patients, and doctors can get caught in the middle.
Definitely. So as we wrap up, here's something for you to think about. In a system where medical decisions face intense scrutiny and outside interests, financial or legal, can exert real pressure, how do we make sure the patient always stays at the center? Is super detailed documentation the ultimate protection for good medicine? Or can it also become a weapon used to bog things down and maybe deny care people actually need?